right, for redevelopment from farmland or crown land. That's part of the problem. I mean, half of Grahamstown should never ever have been approved. It was approved under the noise forecast, and then people started complaining, saying, well, they come complaining to the federal government, when federal government has been continually warned, council has been continually warned by Department of Defence about where it shouldn't develop, and the Moffat case was a classic point in that. Council decided to approve it after Defence advised them no, and that's where council got stung. And it wasn't Defence that paid the bill; it was the council, because they had been negligent in understanding the advice of Defence, or taking into consideration. And I know it's not related here, but I fear the same thing is going to happen at Kings Hill. So when you say council should jump in and approve it, if they do and they've got advice not to, they then open themselves up for litigation. But on the maps, what is supposed to happen, the F in the ANS says it's a forecast, it's not an actual. And one of the things that we drove under the Williamtown Consultative Committee, when it was first established under Robert Hill, was them to put mobile noise measuring, is a special name for them, but they measured the decibel ratings, and they were putting them in different positions under flight tracks for periods of time and recording what the actual decibel ratings were to try and relate it back to the ANF, because if you've got a cloudy day, it's a lot noisier. If it's at night time, it's a lot noisier because there's less ambient sound around. And it depends whether a plane comes through once, or we know the other. Plane comes over you once or twice, people go, oh, look at that, it's magnificent. It comes through 1,000 times and people say, well, it's getting a little bit...
So what happens in Sydney, if the flight pass there?
Under
our daughter,
yes.
Well, they live virtually underneath one of those, and people still go ahead building and developing.
Yeah, well, the federal government then, and I think it was under Keating, went and insulated houses under a certain noise profile, but then they moved to change the approach, so they do a predominance approach from sea, and then they share at a certain time of day on the east-west runway.
And did that fix the decibels?
No. But people got their houses insulated.
But they were a lot quieter than what we're talking about here.
Not really great. You've got to remember the plane rolls out of Sydney Airport about every 45 seconds during peak time.
Whereas the jets from the RAF base, they're only flying, they talk about them flying like as if they're there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and they're not.
I'll let Mike go through flying crash loss, he's the expert, but I just want to let you know where I understand the issue to be and the questions I'm raising on the issue.
We're just throwing to Mike Smith right now, who's representing the Air Force Base, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, Captain Mike Smith.
For the short straw.
I drew the short straw. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks very much for having me tonight. I represent the Senior Defence Officer at RAF Base Williamtown, Air Commodore Mel Hutfield, who's in America at the moment, and I'm his deputy out at Williamtown. I've been there 3 weeks, and the last 4 years I've spent, no problems. The last 4 years I spent in America in the Joint Strike Fighter program. So I'm fairly familiar with where we are with Joint Strike Fighter. So that's why I'm here, if you want any questions answered about the Joint Strike Fighter. 2 years after I was in the job, Australia, as part of a consortium of different countries, because there's 9 countries involved in buying this aircraft, decided to spend itself $1.2 million to do some additional noise trials out at Edwards Air Force Base. So that was funded by a program, because we were very, very aware that even though we had initial data from one of the early test aircraft, that the aircraft would be quite noisy. In fact, the reason for that is just physics. It's a 40,000 pound thrust engine compared to an 18,000 pound thrust engine they have out on the Hornets right now, which they have 2 of course. So it just so happens to be the largest, most powerful single engine jet engine ever developed, and part of the problem with that in full afterburn, it's going to be quite noisy. So after that 2-year period, we actually funded this trial to get some extremely valuable noise data. So Air Force or the DMO contributed to that study, which we shared out to everyone else, because we're not alone here. Every other nation is very, very concerned about noise in all their bases. In fact, the US at their first base, at Eglin Air Force Base in Florida, you'd think the mighty US, where they're buying the most of these aircraft, they're going to buy 2,400 of these aeroplanes as they're planning. And Eglin Air Force Base is one of their premier weapons bases where they do all their training. They're all set to fly 120 aircraft out of there. Sounds like a lot. And after their noise equivalent study, the environmental impact study, they were restricted by the Congress to only fly 59 aircraft. So believe you me, this is not a unique problem to Australia, to the US, who manufactures the aircraft who are buying the most. The Dutch are extremely sensitive about noise, and so is the UK and many other European countries. So we spent a lot of money on this noise data, which contributed to the studies that you see here tonight. So I'll clarify that and say, yes, we did. Defence has very, very accurate data, noise forecast on the very first aircraft that was flying, representative of how loud that engine is. And like I said, we actually had cranes alongside the runway. The aircraft came with exactly the sensors that you talked about. And so we measured that. Now these studies were derived on the Joint Strike Fighter when it comes out here beyond 2018 to do only practice strafe runs. The Joint Strike Fighter will not be able to drop practice bombs at all, so it won't be using salt ash, if at all, to use practice bombs, unlike the Hawk and the Hornet today. So if it does use salt ash when it comes out here, it will only use it for dive bombing and strafe, and it won't be live weapons, it'll be inert weapons just like the Hornets now.
So after it's warmed up and taken off, is there, like, you know, you've got that initial noise, is it going to be the same once it's in the air? Will that
no, normally, as you pointed out quite there, because it's quite a powerful engine, it'll climb out very, very steeply compared to most aircraft, so it'll be up at altitude, quite high, so you probably won't hear it and flying quite a distance away from most of its training, probably off the coast.
So why are they carrying on?
It's when it climbs out.
We're not bothered with what we've got now.
Well, that's the question that I'm raising. Why has the flight profile changed so much?
Yeah.
And why is the hook out at Tanova Bay gone? And people there will think of that, but then why has this area here expanded?
In this discussion that we're having,
Yes.
the council and you know what they're requiring,
Yes.
they're really doing a wonderful job on protecting the house.
Mm-hmm.
What about the people that work in the areas and walk around?
Well, there's two
Where do
parts
they come
to
into
it.
it? What happens with them?
Looking at the age demographic of this room, most of you have been parents who are grandkids. How hard is it to keep them indoors all the time?
So what is
Can you hear
next?
the loud noise levels coming from the next room?
Hang on, Bob, just a bit.
We're not wearing hearing aids, so it hasn't
I almost have to, so.
Yes, but most of us here aren't,
Yeah.
and we've lived here how many years, so...
Has that been considered? I just don't see how it's been considered.
What's it affecting?
Well,
Like if they're going to
I
protect
can't
the house.
explain the actions of council other than the safety, because council always shoots in two directions. You saw last week, certain councils want to move class actions against defence, at the same time approving land under noise profile areas. So, I mean, the credibility there is shot beyond belief. The problem that council has, speaking objectively and legally, is if a plan is laid down such as that, and then they approve dwellings under that
Yeah, you
plan.
said that earlier, Bob.
Yeah, well, this is where council got to be careful. I mean, the last one cost them what, $5 or $6 million?
6 million.
$6 million in the court case and the settlement. So they don't need another court case and settlement. So they've got the thing that's got to happen is we've got to get defence to better qualify its program. And as I say, and you can take this back, Mike. Given the Hawk is going to still fly the same profile, and these came out, the last 2012 came out not because of the Hornet, it actually came out because when we introduced the Hawk, and that was the first time they had a gazetted ANEF. As I say, the 2012 one really bears probably only about an 80% correlation to the truth of the noise. I mean, the noise footprint is a lot less than that. This one here just seems to be so widespread, but even in my limited understanding, given the aircraft's a lot noisier, and given you're not going to do bombing runs, if you're only doing strafing, and you don't strafe every day in the aeroplane, it's not like normal.
Or you're going straight from a different altitude, there's a lot of variations.
I just find a lot of those figures
a worst case possibly.
But in the ANEF over the airport strip actually also includes the commercial aircraft. It's not just all military aircraft, it's all aircraft.